was like, I love you, Goof. You're a goof. And he was like, I love you too, Ma. And the next day, he was gone.
Tom and Bridget Noring's world was shattered when they lost their 19-year-old son unexpectedly. Like too many young people, he had purchased what he thought was a Percocet through Snapchat, only to discover it was 100% fentanyl.
I said, you can't die from taking a Percocet. And he said, oh, yes, you can, Ma. If it has fentanyl in it, you can die. And I remember turning to the law enforcement officer standing at the door, and I was like, my son was murdered.
Since their son's death, the Norings have been raising awareness about our nation's deadly drug epidemic, even telling their story on Dr. Phil. They are also suing the parent company of Snapchat.
It was an actual ring of just young adults, Devin's age, in our community selling these pills.
Via Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I think is important to bring up that's changed in the sort of way these deals take place since time we were kids is these drugs are being delivered to your doorstep. They're being delivered by kids who probably look just like your kid. They maybe went to school with them. Just because your kid's at home doesn't mean they're safe. Unfortunately, we felt like, okay, Devin's at home. It's a Friday night. What a safer place for him to be than at home with us in his bedroom.
Right.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the case because of
Right.
the way that Snapchat and these drug dealers use the platforms like Snapchat and bring the drugs directly to your home now.
Welcome to Grieving Out Loud. I'm Angela Kennecke. I started this podcast and my charity, Emily's Hope, in memory of my daughter Emily, who lost her life to fentanyl poisoning at the age of 21. I believe by sharing our stories of suffering, we can raise awareness about our nation's deadly drug epidemic and help put an end to it.
Well, Bridget and Tom, thank you so much for joining me. And I am so sorry for the loss of Devin. He was only 19 years old, middle of the pandemic. Tell me what was going on.
For us, Devin was home during the pandemic. He had got sent home from work that Monday, so 5 days before he passed. They were doing temperature checks at work, and apparently he was above the temperature, so they sent him home. He tried like heck to get back to work. He wanted to work, but with the pandemic, the doctors, you're quarantined, come back 10 days. If you're fine, we'll give you a note to go back to work. Prior to his death, he had been being seen for blackout migraines and dental pain.
Why did he have dental pain?
Devin suffered from anxiety, and so he would clench his teeth a lot, and he had broken
J type thing.
Bruxism.
He had bruxism.
Sure.
He was a grinder and a clencher, but he had cracked the molars on both sides of his teeth. He got in time to get one half of his mouth done. He was supposed to have gone back on the 2nd of April to get the other side done, but the lockdown came just 2 or 3 days prior. So that appointment got canceled along with his MRI that he was supposed to have had on the 3rd.
So he was suffering from migraines, jaw pain,
Correct.
and anxiety. Was
And
he treated
anxiety.
for the anxiety?
So he was treated for anxiety. He's seen our doctor over a couple-year period. They had prescribed him with some different medications to try. Devin didn't like taking any of those medications. He didn't like the way he felt on them. He had a collection of them in his bedroom that were unopened. So
Isn't that funny? Because my daughter was the same way in high school. Maybe ADD, maybe depression, and then she would be prescribed something and she didn't like the way it made her feel. But yet, in the case of your son, he took a pill that he thought was going to make him feel better, right?
Right.
And in the case of my daughter, she took other things that she shouldn't have been taking, but yet they didn't want to take the legal things that were prescribed to them.
Right.
Isn't
It's
that weird?
It's one of those mind-boggling questions, like why? Even for us, my husband has had multiple back surgeries, so we had Percocet in the house.
yeah, we had prescription Percocet in the house. He had access to it. He knew exactly where it was. He'd never touched it in his life.
Yeah, what a question.
The night before he passed, I mean, he was literally sitting right next to me on the couch. He was laughing. He was holding a stick of butter and the butter dish and his hands, and he's like, "Ma, can I melt butter for my waffles?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, you can melt butter for your waffles." And he was laughing, and I was, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, how do you melt the butter?" And I'm like, "You just put it in the microwave, for a couple seconds. Don't go full, 1 minute out. You'll totally dissolve it." And I remember him running up the stairs, and I was like, "I love you, Goof. You're a goof." And he was like, "I love you too, Ma." And the next day, he was gone.
With no real warning. Like
No.
you knew he had this pain and you knew he
Mhm.
had the anxiety, but you didn't know he was buying or using anything, right?
No, and Devin was a super empathetic kid. He had a huge heart. He'd be the first one to help you if you were in trouble. But he was also one of those kids who would never tell you if he was hurting or if he was struggling.
Yeah,
Mhm.
my daughter was a lot like that as well. Big heart, but didn't want to talk if she was struggling, but always wanted to help other people.
When you meet other families like
There's
ours,
some similar
there's
personality
so
traits.
many similarities
Yeah.
in that regard.
So your last words to him were, "I love you."
Mhm.
I have that same with my daughter. I feel so grateful for that now.
Mhm.
At least they weren't angry words or they weren't accusatory words. It was, "I love you." And that's a gift.
Yeah.
That night, Devin said he was going to make waffles and go to his bedroom. To most parents, it seemed like a pretty harmless Friday night. Little did Tom and Bridget know that their son had purchased what he thought was a Percocet through Snapchat. An acquaintance then delivered it right to Devin's room.
The next day in the early afternoon, we had already been up for hours. Tom said to our youngest son, Caden, who was 14 at the time, "Go up and wake your brother up. It's about time he gets up."
Because 1 o'clock in the afternoon by this time.
It was
It's not
about-
It
unusual.
was a little after 2.
Yeah, I
Oh.
mean, it was getting late afternoon and we had sent our daughter to actually go get lunch because everybody was getting hungry. And I told Kate, and I'm like, it's time your brother gets up. Like, I don't know if he's sleeping in or what. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for him to be locked up in his bedroom for the morning.
Well,
just
right. And
not
teenagers. I mean,
socializing.
I've had my teens sleep till 1 in the afternoon and you go in, are you getting up?
Sure. I thought it was a little odd that he hadn't been up yet. And so I told Kate, I'm like, go get your brother up. We got food coming and he needs to eat his lunch. So Caden had gone upstairs and
Caden found him.
so he first went up and checked the door and it was locked, which wasn't uncommon for Devin to do. He just didn't want people bugging him when he was sleeping. And so Caden came downstairs and he was like, yeah, his door's locked. I don't want to wake him up. He'll beat me up if I wake him up, basically. And I said, no, you go up there and you tell him it's time to get up. Tell him I said so. He's got food coming. So Caden went upstairs and the door was still locked. And we had one of those little push button like locks where you can pick it with just like a small pick or whatever. So I told Cade, I'm just like, pop his door open and tell him to get up. So Cade went upstairs to do that. And then it was quiet for a little bit. And then I heard Caden kind of shout down the stairs, Dad, Dad, Dad. And then I could tell from the tone of his voice something was wrong.
And the way that he was moving overhead, there was just a total urgency in it.
Right.
And so he ran up the stairs and I ran behind him. And
I think I ran up the stairs in about 2 steps, about 18 stairs. And I ran to the bedroom and I was the first one into the bedroom after Caden came and got me. And I seen him on the bed laying in his clothes. I could immediately tell something was wrong. His color was off. And I ran over and I grabbed him, his hand and his face, and he was cold. And I knew at that moment that it was already too late. I couldn't process at the moment what had happened.
Right. Having been there, I am so sorry.
Mhm.
It's so traumatic and your brain can't register.
My very first thought was this was a medical issue because of his headaches. He had been struggling with them since high school. He was an athlete. He thought maybe something was going on with his head, so he wanted to get an MRI just to make sure because he would get blackout migraines.
Sure, I could see how you would think it was like a brain hemorrhage or something
Right.
like that.
And he was afraid to even drive his car that he had just bought because he didn't want to crash.
I don't want to hurt anyone, Ma.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
So he was riding to work with me because he was working with me for the summer at my company before he was getting ready to go to college. He had just graduated. So he was saving up money. He bought this car and then he didn't want to drive it because he was afraid he would hurt somebody or crash it. So our first thought was, this is a medical thing. And then it dawned on me that I yelled, dial 911, something's wrong. And I could hear my wife come in, and my first thought was to try to shield her from that. I just tried to stop her in the hallway from coming into the door.
Did you go in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no holding her back.
Right. That's
No.
how I was too. A
Oh.
police officer tried to stop me from going
I
in.
just remember I crumpled
Oh,
Yeah.
in the corner,
Yeah.
like help him do something.
And it was too late.
Yeah.
Because do they know the time of death now, or they don't really know?
No.
But sometime during that.
sometime during the night, probably around 1 or 2 is what they had thought.
So obviously you're in total shock. Out of the blue, your child's dead in his room. I mean, nobody would want that nightmare to play out in their home. Did you get any kind of answers right away?
While we were sitting there waiting for law enforcement and the medical examiner to process the scene with COVID, I mean, they showed up in hazmat suits, so that made it even more like, what is going on? We had to keep our family outside. We didn't want them to see Devin like that. But during that time, I had reached out to one of Devin's friends via Messenger, and I said, Devin's gone. And now in hindsight, what a way to tell your friend.
Well,
But I couldn't speak.
it's
I
not like
couldn't.
you're thinking straight during those first early moments,
I couldn't.
hours.
I couldn't even make a solid sentence. And so he came back a few minutes later and he said, I'm hearing that Devin and so bought a Percocet.
On
So
On
one of
Snapchat.
Devin's friends, because you had texted him to let him
Mhm.
know.
And I read that message like 4 or 5 times and I responded. I said, you can't die from taking a Percocet. And he said, oh, yes, you can, Ma. If it has fentanyl in it, you can die. And I remember turning to the law enforcement officer standing at the door and I was like, my son was murdered. My son was duped. Like, what is this?
We didn't know what fentanyl was. We had to figure it out. We'd never heard of it.
Like, what is
so.
this? Like, my son had so much going and he was so happy in the days before. He made plans to go to California. So.
You found out it was Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we found out the social media platform they used to get these pills, him and a friend, was Snapchat. We found out through snaps from friends.
Chat not only revealed what caused their son's death, but the app also provided the Norings with a glimpse into their son's final moments. Through snaps, the grieving parents were able to piece together the events leading up to their son's death. They believe 2 guys, just acquaintances of Devin's from school, sold their son the deadly pill.
It was an actual ring of just young adults, Devin's age, in our community selling these pills.
Via
Yeah.
Snapchat.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, so there's a little bit of backstory too. We found out the last moments of our son's life through Snapchat because one of his friends started questioning the kid he was with, not knowing that she was going to tell us. We found out that the kid knew something was wrong with Devin for at least 45 minutes to an hour.
So he's actually with him.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he was with him in his room. He tried pouring water on his face, tried to wake him up. We
Sure.
thought that it was odd that the door was locked to Devin's room after we found out what had happened to him. What we found out through Snapchat was this kid had locked the door behind him when he left.
And he just left him.
Yes,
Mhm.
and
He obviously didn't know about Good Samaritan laws or anything. He just was looking out
Right,
for
and
himself, worried about getting into trouble.
Something we wanted to touch
But-
on, but yeah, we think he felt like he was going to get in trouble.
I don't think so. You think so. I don't think so.
So was he charged with anything?
So no,
No.
that he couldn't really be charged with
Why not?
anything because it was a petty misdemeanor
They-
for leaving a scene of a crime.
With
I believe.
the Good Samaritan law, it was explained to us that there's no part within it that says you have to get that person help.
So it's some technicality wording within the law.
Right.
They were more interested in going after the actual dealers than the kid
Sure.
who left him.
Yeah.
We didn't feel so much at the time.
Well,
but
it's all bad. I mean, it's all-
when that kid was leaving, Caden had asked him, is my brother snoring? Is he sleeping? Because he could hear him snoring. And the kid said, yeah, your brother's snoring. And he went to bed and he left. And Caden even came downstairs and mentioned to me that Devin was snoring really loud. And we snore really loud. And I'm like, yeah, he's probably sleeping. He goes to bed early. So I think about that conversation a lot. You asked how Caden was doing. And I think he goes back to that sometimes, knowing that maybe he had an inkling of what was going on.
I think that that's though where your son and you have to give yourself some grace,
Right.
because how were you really to know?
I sat down with him a couple weeks after this happened, just me and him on kind of the doorstep, and just let him know, like, nothing you did was wrong. We kind of feel the same way you do. Like, we should have did this, we should have did that, but he had no idea. Don't blame yourself. And if you need to talk to somebody, you can always come and talk to us. Like, I just wanted him to know that we all kind of felt the same way. He's pretty young at the time.
How old is he?
He's 16 now.
But he was what, 14?
He was 14 at the time. And
So traumatic.
a little bit later on, we asked, do you want to talk to a counselor or anything like that? And he never really wanted to go that avenue. We tried to push him a little bit, and he didn't want to. He was very adamant that he didn't want
Yeah,
to do that.
if you try to put me in there, I'm not going to say anything. I just leave me alone. I want to.
But
it
he's-
definitely affects the whole family. And as time goes by, things will come out that they'll
Right.
tell you, especially as they get older. Emily has other siblings, and that horrible night, that she died. I just think they relive that quite a bit. That they were at home when we came home.
Absolutely. And that's something I mentioned to him. We relive that night often in our minds. And I just wanted him to know he could always talk to us right off the bat. And I think he's been really good about that. He doesn't really want to talk to counselors or anything, but he will come and talk to us when he's feeling down.
Well, he had a bet with COVID. They were homeschooled,
Sure.
distance
They had to
learning,
go
distance
to
learning.
school at home. So, sure.
But he had a counselor, and she said, when are you going to stop focusing on grieving your brother and start focusing on your schoolwork? And he was like,
A
What?
counselor said that to
yeah.
him?
And she said, when are you going to stop grieving your brother? And
On
if
a-
I'm never going to
and-
stop
on a
grieving my
Sunday.
brother.
And
would
he
be the
said,
answer.
I'm never
Yeah.
going to stop grieving. And
Glad
he
he
hung
said
up
that.
the phone on her. And I was like, I cannot believe that just happened. So I think that in itself kind of shies him away from wanting to speak
Well, our
with someone.
society in general wants us all to get over it in 3 days. That's how much
Right.
that's how much time you get off work, and so you're supposed to get over it and move on. And I don't think any of us will ever do that.
Unfortunately, it never gets any better.
No.
It gets easier to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
But
The more you talk about it, the easier it gets to talk about.
While the Norings try to move forward, they still struggle with the fact that they haven't received any closure from the legal system. Despite their efforts, no one was charged in connection with Devon's death. Although
Devin, he got 2 investigations, one into the death side. So that was handled by our city police. But then because of the fake pills, that was an investigation was opened up by our Dakota County Drug Task Force.
State.
And I give biggest props to our law enforcement because they treated our son with so much dignity and respect. And that means a lot because you
Yes,
hear
it does.
so many horror stories. Another junkie gone. You hear these stories from other families than this. And I'm so grateful we didn't have that experience. But we still had access to Devin's devices and Snapchat. And my daughter and one of her friends were able to follow the individuals. And so every time they posted, my God, my phone has
Were they
hundreds and
posting,
hundreds.
like menus with
It was the
sale, colorful
pills.
menus.
Friday nights were the worst because they would have big bags of different colored
And you were
pinks
seeing
and
this
blues
in
and,
real
and,
time on Snapchat.
yes, and
So-
reporting them as they went.
and so
So please tell me that they got arrested. Somebody got arrested.
Not the way you think they would. So it was an ongoing investigation. They needed hard evidence, not just Snapchat. The investigations went on for some time. They questioned these individuals. They felt like they had built a pretty good case around what had happened, and they had pretty good evidence. And when it got before the county attorneys, they decided not to try the case.
What was the reason?
The weird reason they gave us, which still doesn't make much sense to me, was there was 2 pills sold from 2 different individuals to my son and his friend that day and the day before. And they felt like they couldn't prove which pill killed my son from which dealer.
even though they both showed up both days at the same time, they were riding around together throughout town.
How many people were arrested initially?
None.
None.
Oh, none. How many people were suspects? Two?
Two.
Two. Okay. And so neither one charged because they couldn't prove which
Right.
pill came from which one
And
that killed your son.
Backwards reasoning to the county attorney was to tell him that, so if me and my friend went in and stabbed somebody and left and that person died, you wouldn't charge either one of us because you didn't know who gave him the fatal blow. I mean, this was my reasoning to this.
It's a great analogy. It's a great analogy.
I'm like, why wouldn't you charge both of them? They were afraid to try the case, I think, because they felt like they couldn't prove.
The one suspect a couple months later was arrested. They sold to an undercover. So we were like, yes, they're going to get this person off the street. They went before the courts. That person got 3 years probation. Don't do it again.
Do you think he's doing it again?
He is now being indicted federally.
Though the charges against the suspect are not related to Devin's death, the family is hopeful he will no longer be able to sell drugs to others. The other suspect involved in Devin's case is also no longer dealing drugs, but not because he turned his life around. He too died from a fentanyl overdose.
We say Devin died from fentanyl poisoning. He didn't know what was in that pill. This individual, they knew. I have text messages from the one saying a week prior, they Narcan 2 kids. They knew the pills were bad, but they continued to put them out.
Yeah, the kids selling them knew that something was wrong with the pills, but they weren't telling the people on Snapchat.
Right.
He died from his own supply, that one dealer.
So he probably was addicted and had a good idea of what was in his, just didn't think he would die or didn't care.
Or he was looking at the charges that were in front of him and
so he was facing charges in another case.
Yeah.
Multiple.
How many young people have died in your community? How big is your community?
The city of Hastings is approximately 24,000, 25,000 people. We've lost 6 people in 2020, mostly young people. 2021 was the year that 4 individuals that Devin knew passed away. They were all 19, 20.
We had been lobbying and campaigning and trying to spread awareness quickly after Devin passed away. We were trying to do these things because we, as parents, were shocked that we didn't know what this was. We thought we knew what the hard drugs were. We grew up with around substance abuse users in our families. And so we had a pretty good grasp, we thought, on what to talk to our kids about. When this happened to Devin, we went on a pretty strong campaign, and a lot of his friends were on board because they knew this was an issue going on in the town, and nobody was listening to them, and nobody was being a voice or an advocate for them. And that encouraged us to continue on with what we were doing. One of the girls that they found, she was 19. She was wearing one of our fentanyl campaign Devin Memorial hoodies when they found her.
When she died?
When she died.
And so she knew.
Yeah, she knew that this was an issue.
I think one of the biggest things that we are starting to see with these kids is that they don't have a comprehension. They don't understand. So with her, she was with people. From what we were told, they were laughing and watching her nod out. I don't think these kids understand that your friend's not high. Your friend is dying.
The signs of an overdose,
Yeah.
the severity of the pills or the drugs, that the fentanyl that's in these drugs.
So you've been talking about it. You've been doing whatever you can to get the word out. What do you think is working that you're doing? Let's talk about that over what's not working first.
Well,
because we know there's a lot left to do. We all know that,
It's been a long journey.
We actually reached out to our local United Way of Hastings May of last year. And you never know what you're going to get when you put yourself out there, what you're going to get in return. And they've been really great. We've got law enforcement pulled into the table. We've got our drug task force, our city police, our county police, our faith-based organizations are now coming to the table.
It's great.
Recovery communities are coming to the table.
So you're unifying and mobilizing and getting the word out.
Sure. What we've found over the last few years of trying to spread this awareness, I think our first thought was we want to let everybody know what's happening right away. We had an opportunity to go on like Dr. Phil, and we thought, okay, this is our chance to go and spread this message nationally and let everybody know what's happening. This is our way to get in, because pretty much nobody was listening to us at first. So we went and did this, and it didn't get much traction, it seemed like, at
Dr. Phil.
all. Right. So when we got back home, we're like, wow, this didn't really make as big of a splash.
Your phone wasn't ringing off the
No,
hook.
nobody really knew, like, in our town what fentanyl was still at this point, and
Didn't even know we went on Dr. Phil.
right, and just it didn't make the impact that we thought it was going to. So then we were like, we had to reassess. Okay, what are we doing wrong here? Maybe we need to try to work with law enforcement or go after legislation and try to get them involved. So we did that. We tried to get involved with legislation as much as possible, make as many connections as we could there. Like any family, we have our views on politics, but we kind of put that aside and worked with politicians from both sides of the coin to try to put together some legislation. So we attacked it from that avenue. And we also tried to get involved with our local law enforcement and DTF and things like that. And I think what we found after 2 years of doing all this stuff is the biggest impact that we've made has been locally, doing our events with local town hall meetings and bringing awareness to our town. Because the more that we do these events, the more people show up, the more questions they ask, the more they go home and talk about it. They talk to their family, they talk to their kids, their grandkids, their friends. And that's really how we've started to reach these kids. And it's been growing. We've sort of created sort of a model, and we try to use that or give that information of what works for us to, unfortunately, all the new parents that are in this club that nobody wants to be part of.
And you can never leave.
Right. And so that's what we've been doing.
What about Snapchat?
You can take this one.
Well, I have to be very careful now is what I say about Snapchat, because we are one of 9 families that did bring lawsuit against them. It was just recently filed.
Okay.
So
it's just starting to make its way through the court.
We were expecting like the media, TMZ posted it before our attorneys could, and it was like, do you duck and hide,
in the bushes? No.
But no, we were invited in April of 2021 to sit down with Snapchat executives by invitation of another bereaved parent. And I remember we were like 2 minutes into the pre-call the day before of what to expect. And Tom said to me, he's like, get off that call. This person is trying to coach you and you're never going to be heard. You're never going to get your point across. And so I want to see things through. And the next day we had the meeting.
Just a second. Tom, why did you say that?
I could tell by what they were saying and some of the things that they were bringing up that seemed untrue to me. They were trying to coach her into what to bring up and what not to bring up. And
Snapchat itself, the people at Snapchat.
yeah, the people who were talking to us about having the meeting with Snapchat. And as soon as they started having that conversation, I could tell this wasn't going to go the way that she thought this was going to go, or the other parents thought
And
this
did
was
it
going
go
to go.
the way you thought it was going to go?
No.
What happened?
The very first words out of their VP of Global Policy, I think Communications, Jennifer Stout, said, we had no idea that this was happening on our platform until this bereaved parent came to us in November. And we were like, how do you not know? And now we know. They have news articles out there dated back to 2017. So they knew. They knew. So that's a lie. And it just kind of spiraled going downhill. She made it very clear right away. Section 230 came up. Well, it's not us posting it. It's the individuals, and we can't be held accountable.
Yeah.
The right to privacy was huge. They kept privacy. And it was
So you got nowhere.
Nowhere.
So I have a question. You filed this lawsuit. I know money doesn't really matter. Nothing's going to bring your kid back.
Yeah, the money's not really like a reward for us. It's more
You're
like
hoping
a
to do-
punishment to them and hopes to encourage them to make some changes.
I don't want it. I mean, honestly, ours is more so just we hope that in doing so, those at the helm look at Section 230 or make the changes to protect our kids online, do so, because they have to see big tech. They don't care about our kids.
Right.
She made it very clear in that meeting that parents should be doing a better job monitoring our kids. And I'm like, for us, Devin was 19. How do you monitor a 19-year-old's phone who pays their own phone bill? He lived in your home. You had every right to. No,
It's no different to me. A drug dealer, I think of this often with comments too, like on Twitter, somebody says a nasty comment. If they ran up in the street to you, it's no different than a drug dealer on the corner than a drug dealer on Snapchat. How's it any different? It's a public forum.
So I've had some interesting take on some of the things that they've said in these meetings. So for those who don't know, Rule 230C basically protects social media platforms from what their users say. It's
right, so the company itself isn't responsible for what you might put on
right.
your
And
page.
it's
or your
really sort of
profile.
a dated law that was meant to protect people's privacy. The problem with that is if I were to take out an ad in the newspaper selling drugs, obviously the newspaper would get in trouble for that. They can't hide behind that Rule 230C, whereas social media platforms can. So something that I've touched on with Snapchat is they've tried to claim that there's not a technology that they can use to monitor Snapchat accounts. There's absolutely is. You see it every day. They're called advertising bots or ad bots when you say things or look things up on your phone, and all of a sudden on your social media platform, you get bombarded with that product. They also have things like Facebook has monitoring. I mean, if you go against their community standards, they can block it. How do they know that you went against community standards? So the technology is definitely out there.
After several national stories about the lawsuit, Snap Inc. released a statement. The company says it cannot comment on active litigation, but claims it is using cutting-edge technology to find and shut down drug dealers' accounts. It is also continually expanding its support for law enforcement investigations.
One of our things with Snapchat was getting subpoena information to law enforcement faster. Why is there such a delay, and why is it such a mix of responses when law enforcement from different counties or different states are trying to subpoena these Snapchat accounts? Why is there such an inconsistency with it? And they tried to bring up some bogus information about how their servers operate. First of all, they don't own any servers. They don't own any big data centers. They rent their storage from Google and Amazon. So when they want to pull things from Snapchat for a subpoena, they basically have to put a ticket in with Google to pull that information from their servers. And case by case, it is different on how much information is there.
Or is saved.
Right. That
Right.
is saved to the people think that because it's Snapchat, that information's gone. It's not. It's stored on a server somewhere for a certain amount of time. And depending case by case, how they can access that information.
So ultimately, I'm sure the lawsuit will take some time, right? If it's recently filed, you could be years.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you want to see happen between now and whenever it's settled? And then once it's settled, ultimately, what's your goal?
Our goal is just mainly getting the laws in place to start holding social media companies like Snapchat.
So you're talking, you need to go
Accountable.
to DC and lobby.
Yeah. So that's part of it. The other part is having the company take some personal initiative or responsibility for what is on their platforms. You've seen Facebook sort of step up with the suicide stuff on their platform after some people came forward, and they've done a better job of suicide prevention and things like that on their platform. We want to see that from Snapchat. We want to see them take a personal approach and sort of monitor these accounts and go after these dealers and provide better information to law enforcement, not just delete these accounts, but if there's an active investigation going on, work with law enforcement to help them. So these are some of the things we are pressuring them for. If we can't get legislation to do that, we want to take an action against Snapchat like this lawsuit, which will help sort of push them in that direction.
Right. Because you think about all the kids who've died since Devin died, you know, who bought a pill off Snapchat. I just think it's tragic that this goes on.
And Snapchat.
And that's not enough. Your son's death isn't enough to stop it.
No. And Snapchat, even as of a couple of weeks ago, we were able to find a young man in our community, 16-year-old, same age as my youngest son. And within his Snap, you could tap on the Snap itself, and it would bring you to Telegram, where you could see a bigger menu of what was being offered. So the way that they are able to link to their other social media apps.
Social media apps, yeah, because the kids always find the next one,
Right.
And then they're always one step ahead of us, young people.
You know, at Snapchat, they say, well, we got the IP address blocker put out. Our dealers found a way around that in our community. Device blocking. Drug dealers don't hold the same phone. They just go buy a new
They'll
one.
just buy
you
a
know,
burner phone.
A burner phone, right?
They're using the geo-tracking on Snapchat to find new customers too. We found the dealers.
Right. In their area.
So the
right?
locator, yep.
Mhm.
So that's how they're able to prey on these kids. And something that I think is important to bring up that's changed in the sort of way these deals take place since time we were kids is these drugs are being delivered to your doorstep. They're being delivered by kids who probably look just like your kid. They maybe went to school with them. Just because your kid's at home doesn't mean they're safe. Unfortunately, we felt like, okay, Devin's at home. It's a Friday night. What a safer place for him to be than at home with us in his bedroom.
Right.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the case because of
Right.
the way that Snapchat and these drug dealers use the platforms like Snapchat and bring the drugs directly to your home now.
And it's truly a David and Goliath kind of story. You guys are going after the giant social media companies, but really the thing you can do is educate every parent who can
Mhm.
educate every kid.
Absolutely. And that's been our biggest goal as of late because we found that seems to be what's working the best. The more that we talk about our story, the more other parents are willing to come forward and talk about theirs. It sort of alleviates some of that stigma. Bridget can tell you recently we had some parents come forward that had lost children from years ago and they weren't able to talk about it until recently because they felt like they can finally start bringing this into the open.
Right. Right. Well,
Mhm.
thank you
Thank you.
for everything that you're doing. Thank you for carrying this torch. I know it's hard. And I know every time you have to speak about your child or the night that it happened the next
Mm.
day, it opens up this wound that is always there. It kind of scabs over a little bit and it gets opened again and again and again when you put yourself out there. So lots of layers of scabs on that thing. But I feel your pain and I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, and we're very sorry for your loss, but I think what you're doing is really great, giving parents a platform, share their stories. You know, there's power in sharing the stories, even though they are
You
tragic.
know you're not alone.
Mhm.
You know you're not alone.
Absolutely. And the more families that come forward and talk about this and bring it up, the better chance we have of educating people and saving lives and getting education into the schools and police departments and things like that, get the tools that they need. The more this is brought up, the more legislation and things like that start to open their ears and eyes and see what's going on. So yeah, if you have a story to share, please do so. I mean, even if you think nobody wants to hear it, there might be somebody that listens to that and goes home and talks to a family member and it might save a life.
If you have a story, we'd love to hear it. Check out our website, emily'shope.charity, for how you can get involved. While there, you can also find resources for help with substance use disorder. If you found value in this podcast, please consider giving it a positive review. And check out more Grieving Out Loud episodes. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wonnenberg King and Anna Fye.